The League of Women Voters of Santa Clara County presents Santa Clara County Sheriff Candidate Forum live from the Cupertino Community Hall. And now for tonight's moderator, Rosaline Zisch.
Good evening and welcome to our evening to meet our candidates for the Santa Clara County Sheriff. This is sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Santa Clara County, and we are a nonpartisan political organization. We do not support or oppose candidates. I'm Rosaline Zisch. I'm your host for this evening, and I'm a member of the League of Women Voters of San Jose, Santa Clara. If you have a cell phone, we're going to ask you to turn it off, and for the courtesy of all of us who are attending this evening and our candidates as well. The candidates tonight are John Hirokama, Joseph, or Joe, I think he likes to be called, Laluez, Martin Monica, Jose Salcidio, and Lori Smith. The candidates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight's forum, which include a 1-minute opening statement and 1-minute responses to questions. There are timers that will be monitoring the time and will give them a 30-second warning and when to stop totally. We solicited questions for the candidates from the public via email in advance of tonight's forum. We also will take questions from you. We have cards that are available. Hopefully you pick them up, or if you need some, you can put your hand up and some will be brought to you. They will be picked up by members of the League as the evening goes along. Questions that are repetitive will be weeded out or made more concise. We will do our best to answer those questions that are submitted. We do only have 1 hour, so be aware of the fact that we may not get to everyone's questions. We solicited, or I already told you that we have questions already up here for us to begin with this evening. So the question sorters will go through anything that you submit. I would also like you to refrain from clapping for individual candidates or for comments that they may make that you highly approve of or not. Thank you. Appreciate that. We'll save all of our clapping till the end. There is literature about all of the candidates, and that you can find in the foyer when you leave. We will start with 1-minute openings. And as you can see, they're seated alphabetically. So, Mr. Hirokama, you are first.
Good evening. Thank you for coming here tonight. I'm John Hirokama, candidate for sheriff. I have over 35 years of distinguished law enforcement experience with the Santa Clara County Sheriff's Office. I have worked most of the divisions, and I rose through the ranks of the Sheriff's Office. At every level, my superiors recognized me for my exemplary work ethic, initiative, honesty, and integrity. The Sheriff's Office needs a person who has a diverse experience and who has a depth of knowledge of all aspects of its operation, who is totally trustworthy, who is completely honest, transparent, and who has impeccable ethics. I am that person. I want to bring progressive changes to the Sheriff's Office by creating a deep and lasting impact in the fight against domestic violence, human trafficking, sexual assaults, and keeping our communities safe. I have endorsements in the confidence of the thousands of police officers, the men and women who are keeping our local streets and communities safe, and the 11 retired local police chiefs from this county who are endorsing me. They're looking for me to collaborate and bring effective law enforcement.
Thank you very much. Joe, thank you.
My name's Joe LaJeunesse. I'm a third-generation local boy. Grew up here, went to Santa Clara High, and I live in San Jose. I'm a 30-year military veteran. I was enlisted and went up to the officer ranks, retired as a major, military police corps. I'm also a current deputy sheriff, so I'm actually running against my boss over here. So I want to bring change to the department because we've all seen the scandals and what's going on, and we need to change the outcome of what's been going on by getting rid of the leadership. I spent a year on the border from El Centro to Yuma, commanding 150 troops. I also commanded an MP company, military police. I was at Abu Ghraib when the scandal happened, so I got to see what happened there, which is similar here with the death in the jails here and the abuse over there. I also led troops, or I was an anti-terrorism officer in Germany. I've served our country in 3 wars, and I believe it's time for change because the leadership we have right now isn't getting the job done. They're causing a lot of escapes, murders, and everything else that's going on, and you can't keep voting the same people in and expecting a different outcome. Thank you.
And Mr. Monica?
Hello, my name is Martin Monica. I grew up in Palo Alto. My kids went to Cupertino schools, but the key is this. I became a chief of police, but not too many people know I went from a police officer to a chief because the city saw that hired me that I had the ability. If you take that a step further, many of the San Jose police officers that I know that I worked with are now chiefs in our local county. Got them in Sunnyvale, San Jose State, Campbell, and a couple other. So in San Jose PD, they breed people that are understanding of leadership and could go forward. That's what they need at the deputies. I worked with the deputies when I was in San Jose PD. They have major problems with the leadership and collaboration with the other departments. We're not going to solve any crimes if we don't collaborate. You have to talk. Just like if you're married, you have to talk to your wife or husband, otherwise it's over. So if we don't do that, then we lose. And that's what I plan to do, is to be a collaborator and also to bring new and innovative ideas, technology, and so forth into the share. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Salcido?
My name is Jose Salcido, candidate for sheriff, and I'm running because I'm born and raised in this county. I've seen it when it was orchards, as it's developed to become the tech capital of the world. I worked for the Sheriff's Department for 32 years, at what time I retired and went to work in the city of San Jose for the mayor's office, where I was a senior policy advisor on public safety. Actually, when I worked the streets here in Cupertino, and I was also a homicide detective, where I handled the homicide that happened in 2001 at a jewelry store on Wolf Road. That was the first homicide in a 50-year history for the city of Cupertino. We can't say that anymore. We had 2 homicides last year. So I am very concerned about the changes that are occurring to our community. Yes, we're a county of 2 million, but don't tell me we can't be connected. The criminals don't know boundaries. They go from city to city creating havoc. My plan is to focus on your neighborhoods, to make your neighborhood safer through crime prevention. Thank you.
And Ms. Smith?
Thank you. My name's Lori Smith, and I'm the sheriff in Santa Clara County. My career has been dedicated to running a professional organization. We're very, very proud of our accomplishments. Sierra Lamar, bringing the murder of Sierra Lamar to justice, and he's in prison now. A little bit about me. I've got a bachelor's degree and a master's degree, and I'm working on a second master's degree in Homeland Security from the Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey. I serve on many, many commissions and committees, including I've been appointed by the last 3 governors to serve on the Peace Officer Standards and Training Commission that regulates hiring and training standards for law enforcement officers. We have a great crime rate in Santa Clara County, and particularly the 3 cities that we serve, Cupertino, Saratoga, and Los Altos Hills. We're also very, very proud of...
Thank you.
Okay.
And we are proud of our whole county.
Thank you.
Our first question this evening. Santa Clara County is a sanctuary county and has a policy of cooperating with ICE. I'll reread this. Santa Clara County is a sanctuary county and has a policy of not cooperating with ICE. What are your thoughts on that policy? And Mr. Hirakama.
So the county has a civil detainer policy that doesn't cooperate with ICE in regards to people in the county. I'm for that policy in regards to the civil detainers, in regards to cooperating with ICE with felons on a known, what we call it's Penal Code 667.5. So we do cooperate with felony warrants and felony subpoenas with ICE. And so although I am in favor of sanctuary.
Thank you.
So first I'd like to say I'm not anti-immigrant. I helped two of my translators from Iraq immigrate here after the war because they were being assassinated for helping Americans. So it took 5 to 10 years to get them here. I had to vouch for them and send out things to the State Department and how they worked for me and when and all this. But I also worked on the border for a year. I commanded 150 troops from El Centro to Yuma, working alongside the Border Patrol. What I saw coming across was a lot of drugs, a lot of criminals. I get the humanitarian part, but unfortunately you can't have it both ways, because with those humanitarian parts comes also the crime and the drugs, and I'm talking tons of it. So when I was down there, it changed my attitude because I saw what was going on down there, so I'm anti-sanctuary. Why? Because crime comes through the border and comes through to our districts and our counties, and people don't seem to realize that they're bringing a lot of drugs. I'm talking tons at a time, digging tunnels into Calexico, stealing vehicles from Calexico Mall, driving them to Mexico and back, and I saw all this when I was down there. Thank you.
As far as sanctuary cities, I agree, but I go along with the other gentleman here that if they're a felon of any type, we're going to work with ICE on that because we don't want them here. But you got individuals. I'm currently teaching. I have students, I have parents that have been taken by ICE. Their whole breaking the law was coming across here undocumented and getting a job and working here for 20 years. That's not, to me, this hardened criminal. I've seen a change in law enforcement here. They're afraid to go after the hardened criminals. I want to go after those guys, get the guys that are hurting people off the street, not the person that does a red light violation and now we have a warrant for them. I want to go after people that actually hurt you. The drunk drivers that are killing, like last night, killed 3 people. We need to stop that from going on. The sanctuary, I believe, is just supporting individuals that are trying to make a better life, like when our forefathers came here to make a better life. Is there a problem? Yeah, it's Congress, not me. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Salcido?
There's a lot of confusion on SB 54 that was passed by our legislators. And the law actually states that counties that are sanctuary, or actually it's a requirement, can work with ICE on violent crime. Criminals that are convicted of violent crimes, there is cooperation. Now, our county, the reason they decided to do a civil detainer is because it's a civil violation. It's not criminal. So technically, our county can't hold an individual in jail against their will for a civil detainer. I would like to see the federal government. Kate Steinle was killed by an individual that had left 5 times. Why can't we make it a criminal offense after the 2nd or 3rd time back into our country? Then it becomes a criminal detainer, and now we can hold them. So I'm an advocate that we change, reform at the federal level. Someone gets deported 2, 3 times, that's it. It's now federal crime, and we now can hold them. So call your congressman and put the pressure on.
Ms. Smith?
So yes, we have a policy in Santa Clara County on not cooperating with ICE, and it is now the law, and we adhere to the law. Also, I think the way that ICE had been doing business in Santa Clara County was not a fair manner. They weren't judging things correctly. Jose did mention that they are civil detainers. We do accept criminal arrest warrants on federal charges, and that's consistent with our policy. There really needs to be overall immigration reform on a national level. There has to be a path to citizenship, and we can't continue to do what we're doing here in this state. Santa Clara County has sued the federal government. I signed a declaration in support of the lawsuit against the Trump administration and their immigration practices also. So I support what we do. I think immigration hasn't done it correctly, and I definitely agree with support of following the law.
Our second question. The Sheriff's Office oversees the county jail system. What are the biggest challenges that the Sheriff's Office is experiencing on the custodial side of its responsibilities? And Mr. Hirakoma?
So the biggest issues in regards to its staffing, facilities, and input from the rank and file about how to implement those issues And so without the proper staffing and without the proper facilities, you can't address the big issues that I tackled when I was working at the Sheriff's Office in regards to mentally ill in our jails. I initiated, we had one psychiatrist. I petitioned and advocated for additional psychiatrists. Today they have 10 from one. I also wanted psychologists in those with the psychiatrist to help with the mentally ill in our jails because there's a high recidivism rate for the mentally ill. That doesn't even address the medical issues, the dental issues. And so we brought in experts prior to the death of Michael Tyree, and then I advocated to bring in additional experts to try to help us maneuver through those issues in regards to also the overcrowding and jail time.
Thank you.
So I've had the unique experience of being at a place where the jails went wrong, like I said, Abu Ghraib. It was the lack of leadership there, lack of staffing, training, and resources. Same thing happened here, lack of leadership. It all starts from the top down. If the leadership isn't doing what they're supposed to be doing, then obviously the guys and gals on the bottom aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing. So the first thing they did at Abu Ghraib was fire the leadership. They fired the general, who was in charge of all the MPs in there. They fired the colonel in charge of the jails. And then the chain of command and anybody else who had anything to do in that chain of command replaced them and did a whole new training, new leadership, everything had to go. And you haven't heard anything since then. And actually I was part of that training group that trained the people to go into Guantanamo, Iraq, and Afghanistan. So I got to train and learn from those experiences and see what's going on here. Same thing happened here. You can't keep having the same leadership here and expect a different thing. They were in charge when this happened. So they need to be held accountable as leaders. Because if they're not, the same thing's going to happen. You can say you're going to change everything, but it didn't do any good for Michael Tyree or the ones that escaped.
Thank you.
Looking at the jails, there is a major problem when people are being murdered by our law enforcement people there. That's a tragedy. The leadership failed their job, and I wouldn't hire them again. But the problem is they don't get any further than that. There's a problem with putting mentally ill inmates with the regular inmates, and that creates another problem, what created the problem for the murder. I have a friend that son was in there at the same time. He tried to go to the leadership here. He got beat up, they broke his arm, and they put him in another Tascadero. So the leadership isn't even listening to the inmates being abused. That's a problem. What they need to do is have a separate facility for the inmates with mental illness and work with them on making sure they take the medication they need medically, and then they take their time. That's not being done. It's more of the same old stuff. We have to change. It's like these big companies here. Thank you.
Thank you.
So there is obviously a problem in the culture in the jails. You've been hearing it on the news for months now. They actually formed a Blue Ribbon Commission of 25 citizens who got together and studied the problems and made over 140 recommendations, including changing the leadership. That was clear on their recommendations. So there's no doubt about it, there's a need for change. The environment of the jail is something that needs to be focused on, both for our officers who work there, but also for the inmates. We need to change the way inmates are treated. There needs to be human dignity in the jail. The inmates need to believe that they can change their lives and get jobs, not continue the revolving door of the jail, putting out people who are better at committing burglaries than they are at working. So to me, last year, a 74-year-old was killed in Cupertino by a woman who had a mental health issue. That's a concern. If we don't start treating in jails mental health, we're going to have more problems.
Ms.
So one of the big problems that we have right now in the jail is mental health. You've heard it a lot. Also, we're running a prison more than anything else with the passage of AB 109. It was mentioned that we did have a murder in the jail. Yes, we arrested 3 of our correctional deputies. They're in prison now. When that happened, and this has been reported in the paper, the chief of corrections was John Hirakawa. And what did he do when that happened? He ran and hid. A group of our staff got together, we wrote a reform plan, we jumped in, we took charge of the situation when there was really a lack of leadership. Has there been a change of leadership as recommended by the Blue ribbon, yes. There is a new chief of correction, same sheriff. We're making a lot of progress. It's also great to see that we have a lot of captains, lieutenants, sergeants here that are supporting me internally. They see what leadership is, and the leadership has really changed and changed a lot since he left as number 2. You can't run and hide, and you can't avoid a problem.
This next question, we're going to start at the other end of the table with Ms. Smith, please. What are the 3 major points of your election platform and why?
The first one really is victims. We have a lot of services for offenders, as we should, because we want to reduce recidivism, but I think more attention needs to be paid to the victims. If you are a victim of crime, what are the services that you can get? And the second one is kids, keeping kids out of gangs in school and out of gangs. And I think that that's really important too, and we're seeing a lot more gun violence. So gun violence is another one. But really victims' rights, human trafficking, we've started a human trafficking task force, and the way that we're looking at victims now really has changed in law enforcement recently. And even victims of immigration, people who are preying on immigrants and creating fraud. We've started an Ontario unit within the Sheriff's Office too, focusing on those victims. So I'm a big advocate of safety and victims.
Thank you. Yes.
My number 1 priority is your safety, neighborhood safety. I'm interested in neighborhood watch groups. I'm interested in bringing programs, actually, that I was able to learn about when I moved to the mayor's office in San Jose. San Jose PD is very progressive when it comes to the type of programs they create for people. They even have a stop program for businesses so that if an encampment is created on a business, the business owner or the property owner has the power to remove them. Those are the kind of programs we need to focus on. Number 2 is leadership. The right type of leadership in the jails is going to change the environment to make it safer. And with that comes jail reform. Our nonprofits need to come into the jail. The nonprofits have the passion to change people's lives. They're able to actually put people on the right track, and they're very efficient financially because they get money from the private sector, not just government money. Certainly we'll support them, but it's like doubling your tax dollars when you have them working inside jails, changing lives and getting people to get jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Monaco?
I'm from San Jose PD, as Jose is talking about. They're innovative. That's what we need to do there. 3 things, there's a lot on my webpage, but one would bring new leadership that actually knows how to bring innovation there. And one of the things is to find out how we make sure we get 0 recidivism. If they come back, it's the same old thing. Studies show, if you read, that in fact, educating the inmates with a real education, not these funky little programs they got there, but actual education, 0 recidivism. The other thing is bring community policing in. It's not a program like some people think here. It's an actual philosophy that if you read, another San Jose officer that left our department, went to New York, became chief, Houston, and was the drug czar for President Clinton. He did all that with community policing. We got to do something different and bring somebody from the. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I want to bring a new approach. I want to bring a proactive, progressive leadership to this department where the criminals react to us. We don't react to them. Right now, we go on patrol and we get calls and we're reacting to what they're doing. Some of the techniques I've been taught are using pattern analysis, trends, taking resources from one area to another where the crime is happening, put them on the defensive, not us. We're always reacting to them. It's time for them to react to us. Once they're reacting to us, this is what I did in Karbala when I was in charge of the city of 1.1 million people doing law and order. I had to hire the Iraqis, train them, run a police academy, jails, and do law and order. So one of the things we did because of the crime was using trends and pattern analysis, plus bring modern technology into this department. The sheriff and the undersheriff came in the 70s and 80s. We're still stuck in the 70s and 80s. We need to move forward and use Google, Apple, Facebook, social media to get in our department, putting computers in our cars that tells us where the other deputies are so we know where they are and what's reacting. So we need to be proactive, not reactive.
Thank you.
So my approach is collaboration, not only with the law enforcement, the vast majority of law enforcement men and women that are endorsing me, but also with you, the community. Engaging the community and coming to you, asking you what your concerns and issues are, and then dealing with those issues, and collaborating with everybody, not only on a county level, but on a regional level. And so I have the confidence of the local law enforcement officials that I will do that because they have worked with me in the past. My other issue would be the jail reforms. We spent hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars on jail experts. We just need to listen to them and implement the reforms that they were pushing for, including the Blue Ribbon Commission. Since the death of Michael Tyree last year, you had another murder in the jail, but that hasn't been broadcast, plus 4 other deaths at the Elmwood facility. They weren't listening to the experts who were telling them not to move so fast, wait for the staffing and wait for the facilities before making these changes and to avoid the deaths that they have occurred last year.
Thank you, Mr. Hirakawa. Our next question, by the way, it was mistyped on my prompt sheet. I was really having trouble with that. Thank you. Our next question, and we're going to start with Mr. Monica this time, and we'll go, well, that would be south, and come back and end up on this other side. So we'll go to your left and come back. Thank you. This is to keep everybody awake, right?
It's working.
The Sheriff's Office provides law enforcement for unincorporated parts of Santa Clara County and some smaller entities in the county that contract with it to provide law enforcement services, such as Cupertino. What are your feelings about this and your policies you would support?
My feelings, I feel good. No, contract, you have a contract and you help out that community that doesn't have a police department because it does cost a lot. As far as way out in the boonies, we were out talking to people in Gilroy, and they were having concerns about deputies responding and then whining that they were at the call that the person made. So those are things that, to me, are upsetting, where the officer shouldn't, or the deputy shouldn't be doing that. They should be going, how can I help you, and so forth. So it's about training, it's about community policing, working as a team to solve problems, but it's more than what John was saying about going and ask you. It's something that everybody from the top down does and goes out to community and work with them. But it sounds like that's the way to go as far as for budgets of cities, and I would support that, but also put more training to make sure they are full. And thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Salcido.
As far as the contract cities go, I think, I'm so glad that the Sheriff's Department has 3 contract cities. I worked Cupertino for a long time and very much enjoyed the community. It's a great community. But I think there's room for improvement. And frankly, I think never surrender, never give up, always improve. You have CSOs here that work for the city. I would like to approach the city and ask them to be working out of our West Side Station. A CSO connected with the officers, knowing the deputies and the work they're doing, will become more knowledgeable and ultimately provide better service to you. That is a decision they would have to make. On the unincorporated side, I think we have to up our game. The thing with unincorporated is there's long distances. It takes a long time to get there, which means we need to work with all of our cities to coordinate all of our training, to make sure we're using the same tools that, for instance, license plate readers. San Jose PD uses 12 of them. The Sheriff's Department should also have license plate readers because they can detect stolen cars and constantly be on the lookout.
Ms. Smith?
So, yes, we are in charge of everything that's not incorporated in a city, which is geographically a large portion of the county. And we have our 3 contract cities. I wouldn't call Cupertino small, but we have Cupertino, Saratoga, and Los Altos Hills, and we're really, really proud of the relationships we have, with the councils, I see a few former mayors here too, and current council members. We provide exceptional service and at a very cost-effective rate. If you compare Saratoga and Los Gatos, it has similar population. Saratoga uses us, and that's about $5 million a year. Los Gatos has their own police department. It's about $15 million a year. We're cost effective, and by Cupertino contracting with us, we're able to bring huge number of resources if we have a major crime into the area, and that has happened, the quarry shooting and other things that have happened in Cupertino. So I think there's a big advantage to the citizens also of Cupertino.
Thank you very much. Yes. You're up.
So, again, I'm going to talk about community engagement, but also what's important as regards to listening to the rank and file, the men and women who are serving on the streets out here, and listening to their ideas and being able to communicate with them, and so they don't have a fear of believing that they would be retaliated against in regards to if they have an opposing opinion from the administration. So those rank and file members have the best ideas because they're the ones who are doing the job. That's where I start, and also with the community. I had the pleasure of serving the captain out here for the contract cities. And so the contract cities, I was community engaged. I went to the community meetings. You gave me Cupertino Officer of the Year. You, Optimist Club, gave me Officers of the Year because of my community engagement and how I dealt with the issues out here. And I plan to do that even as sheriff. I'm not going to leave it up to my subordinates to go to the community meetings and listen to you, because there's a lot of things that are missing in between that message.
Thank you, Mr. Kirkegaard.
So I also patrolled in Cupertino, and one of the calls I remember was, and this is community policing, was a mom called us because her son wanted to get out of bed to go to school. So we had to go there and get him out of bed to go to school. So, that environment here was very friendly. We went in there and did that, and you got up and went to school. But we need to have more community policing and more engagement, not just like we do for the contract cities, but like they said, for the unincorporated areas. Because I also did calls in the South County where, we were out there and our backup is 30, 40 minutes away. So I see a disparity between the contract cities and unincorporated areas, having patrolled both. And we need to make it so we're all one team. That's the thing. We all should get the same sort of law enforcement experience, regardless if you're unincorporated or if you're a contract city. And that's not happening. So I'd like to change that to make sure that everybody's getting the same law enforcement experience for, all community policing areas. And that would bring, I think, a lot of pride and respect to the community and also the deputies. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, we're going to start with Mr. Salcido. And the question is, the morale of the Department of Correction is and the patrol units are reported to be at an all-time low. How would you address this issue?
Well, we can start by taking politics out of law enforcement. I think deputies expect to be treated with respect. I think, I remember Sheriff Smith at the last campaign called them Keystone Cops. I mean, to me, that's, well, it was to the union, but the bottom line is the union represents the deputies that work there. So to me, let's get rid of all the toxic language and let's start focusing on improving the support to our deputies. Our deputies deserve to get respect, and they deserve to get the right training. They deserve to get the tools to do their job. There are so many agencies that are around in this county that have better tools than our deputies. So our deputies need to get up, because that's all about making you safe in your neighborhood. That's what it's all about. Our deputies want to do their job. They want to protect you, but they have to have the ability to do that, and they need the support from an administration that is going to back them on that.
Thank you. Ms. Smith, please.
So the question obviously comes from the floor about all-time low. I don't know how that's measured. I probably disagree with what it is, but there's always room for improvement in morale in the organization. I think that making sure that we have the best equipment, the best training, and the best tools for people to do their job, I think is very, very important. We also have a very, very low rate compared to other agencies of people who leave the sheriff's office and go to other agencies. It's between 1 and 3% of people who leave. And I think that really tells, if people are unhappy with working this organization, they certainly have choices. Everybody's hiring, everybody is looking for quality people. We have a high retention rate that we're real proud of within the organization. But if there's anything I can do further for the staff, I always remain.
Thank you very much. And Mr. Hirokawa?
So whether people will leave or not, it's not an indicator of morale. It's really about what the opinion of the men and women in the organization. So my first duty would be to ask the rank and file, to engage them in regards to what their issues are. How are their immediate supervisors dealing with them? Are their immediate supervisors, whether it be a sergeant, lieutenant, captain, assistant sheriff, undersheriff, how are they dealing with them, and what's their opinion of their leadership today? And then once from that, you could then do an assessment of where the morale's at. I have told them I plan to do peer-to-peer evaluations, subordinate to superior evaluations. So a group of sergeants evaluate a lieutenant to get a full gauge of where the organization is and what they think of their leaders. Is their leader, their supervisor, leading by example? Is their supervisor or leader telling them or making decisions based on short-term or based on long-term solutions? That's what it then emulates back to the community, to you, how they serve you. If they're thinking they're being treated fairly, they'll treat you fairly.
So morale does affect if people leave. I can tell you as a deputy sheriff, which is, like I said earlier, I still am a current deputy sheriff, the morale sucks. It really does. People are leaving because they're afraid of retaliation. Let me tell you what happened to me. I went to Iraq. Before I went to Iraq, my boss over here asked me to resign. Not because I did anything wrong, but because I went and served my country. When I came back, I got threatened with a lawsuit by a guy named Captain Rody, her human resources captain. Said if I didn't resign, they're going to take me to court. So then I come back to work. I try to go back on patrol. Are you going to be here? And then I put in for assignment that I was qualified for, denied. Denied again. So I'm stuck in court. Not where I want to be, but what I'm doing now is trying to make changes. I learned as a leader, you don't sit there and complain about it. If you don't get what needs to be done, you do something about it, which is what I'm doing. That's called moral courage. And I'm standing up against my boss and undersheriff saying, your leadership needs to go. If you're treating me like that and other deputies won't get promoted, I've seen this because they're being retaliated against. And I know because I'm at the bottom level.
Thank you.
What I'd look at, a couple of things is, I was a cop here when the deputies controlled the jails. There wasn't any corrections. And at that time, I didn't see as much of the strife that we have now. So I would kind of analyze that scenario and see why there's such a difference now. I wouldn't go out and tell my sergeant to evaluate the lieutenant. You're going to create problems you're not even ready for. And from a business standpoint, 101, that's the worst thing you can do. What you got to do as the leader is to go out there and search what's going on. You go out and be with everybody. You listen. You go out in the field. You go on midnight. You see what's going on. You don't say, hey, evaluate that guy and tell me what's wrong with him. Really? You talk about problems now, you're going to have a whole bunch of problems. So you as a leader have to say, you know what, I'm going to take time out. I'm going to be going to this place, and see everybody and see what's going on. Watch, listen. Don't tell them you're coming. Watch them. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next question, and this one we will start with Mr. LaJuez.
Yes.
What improvements or changes, if any, would you want in order to ensure and promote that non-citizen residents feel comfortable reporting crimes and cooperating with the police?
Well, this is the hard part, and this is one thing I learned on the border. They group us all together as law enforcement. They just see a uniform. You can be military, border patrol, local cop, and they all think that you're the bad guy and they're going to deport them. So we have to get the word out to them in a way to understand that we're all not doing that, because local police, it's not our job to deport anybody. It's to protect every resident in this county regardless of their status, and that's what they need to understand. So we need to get the word out because we've lost the communication between the immigrant community and the law enforcement. And the current administration, the president isn't helping, and then of course everything else that's going on, like I said, on the border. And also you have to realize that Border Patrol has stopped turning over certain felons to California because they're afraid they're not going to get them back. So they're not letting them go through our court system. So right there you have another adverse effect of this sanctuary law. So they're going to be deported but not go to court. So that right there I think is another thing we have to worry about.
Thank you. Mr. Monaco?
I think, again, we come back to community policing where we actually go out and work with all the nonprofits. Like we went to a forum with Siren, that's about immigrants. You get the connection with these groups. They already have a connection with the groups out there. so we could help people to understand we're not going to be arresting people just because you're undocumented. We're not the feds. And where I'm at school, I talk to parents all the time that speak only Spanish, that are undocumented. I say, the cops don't arrest you, only the immigration guy, but that's another story in itself. So if you don't communicate with the groups, collaborate, and also work with their department like San Jose PD, work as a team, showing that we work as a team and not separate, to support them, to tell us about the crimes. Because if they do the crime to that undocumented person, they're going to do it to you, and we need to stop that. So it's a matter of just working with all the groups out there, get a good feel, and getting training from those groups so the officers can understand.
Thank you.
Can you repeat the question for me?
Certainly. Let's see, where did I put it? I think I folded it over. I am bad.
Immigrants. afraid.
Yes, right. It's the immigrants being comfortable speaking
Building
to
trust.
police. Yes, the trust issue.
All right. So I think cultural competency training is very important for deputies to be introduced, to understand the cultures. I also think it's very important that we hire deputies that reflect the community that work there, so that the citizens that are calling them see themselves basically on the response. And I believe we need to be present in community events and festivals and be, community policing. I'm assigned currently to Huff and Viamonte. I work for Councilmember Camas, City of San Jose, and Huff and Viamonte is a gang hotspot. We ended up bringing San Jose PD in there for a full year called Safe Communities, and I saw community policing at a very high level. I had police officers that would call me. This was a rent control area, and they would call me and complain that a tenant was having their rent increased. These are immigrants, people that ultimately are in the shadows. And we were able to make sure that rent was not increased. To me, that's awesome. Law enforcement calling in on
Thank you.
rent.
So I'm going to talk really fast on this. So yes, we need trust of the entire community. And I think that there's been a lot of damage done by the federal government right now in instilling more fear in people that we have tried really hard to build. If people are afraid to report crimes, or particularly if they're a victim of crimes, it just does not help us do our job. And so like in the Sierra Lamar case that I mentioned earlier, the young girl that was kidnapped and murdered, she was taken from an area where there were a lot of farm workers, and we actually really reached out to the immigrant community to say, if you've seen something, please tell us. I think I'm probably the only sheriff in the state that has filed a declaration in support of the county's lawsuit against the Trump administration, where I really think we have a lot of damage, and we've got to do a lot more work to build trust. I think that we have lost. They're part of our community, and they deserve the same thing all of our citizens.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kennedy.
So for me, it's two parts. First part is you need an elected sheriff who's going to stand up and voice their opinion in regards to approving of the sanctuary status to protect our immigrants, because that does have a reflection on the trust in the community for our day-to-day operation for the deputies and the police officers in the street. If you don't have that trust, then they're not going to cooperate with you. We already have problems with underreporting of domestic violence, underreporting of sexual assaults, underreporting of human trafficking, underreporting of child molestations. So now you're bringing in immigrant communities who feel the fear of the federal government. And so you need an elected sheriff who stands up, have the rank and file know exactly where that elected sheriff stands on these issues, and that they won't tolerate in regards to the cooperation with ICE, in regards to these civil detainers, in regards to undocumented and checking people out. You need somebody to stand up to that. Not just filing a lawsuit for federal grant dollars, not about the sanctuary status. So the lawsuit she's talking about is about federal dollars.
Thank you. I want our wonderful audience to know that it's at least 15 to 20 degrees hotter up here.
It's really hot.
Not anything to do with what we're talking about, which are really tough topics, but for some reason, I really feel like we all need a fan.
Yes, okay, good.
And probably some ice. So we are perspiring, but it's not because we don't believe in what we're saying or that we over-believe in what we're saying. So I just wanted to share that information with you. And I'd like to give you each just 30 seconds to tell us your hobby and if you own a pet.
Oh.
And for this one, it's such a tough one. So let's our sitting sheriff tell us first.
Oh, hobbies. I think lately my hobby's been working. I do a lot of home improvement on my own. I'm an avid bridge player. I ski, not as much as I used to, and hiking, backpacking. We have a cabin, no electricity in the mountains.
Great. And do you have a pet?
Oh, no, don't. Always
Okay.
had dogs and cats, none now.
Okay.
So I love golf. I have a son who's actually border professional. I love going out and being amazed by a great golfer, because I'm not. I also enjoy volunteering and mentoring high-risk youth. I like taking care of young people, and if they're on the wrong track, I like to put them on the right track. And I also have a big dog, 150, 160-pound Leonberger. So I do love dogs.
Yeah, that's a lot of dog. Mr. Monica?
Well, my hobby is reading and being with the family. I have 3 dogs. They're little guys, so they're jumping around on me, and at night they all want to sleep with Dad. So.
Great, thank you.
So I have
Yes.
a German Shepherd, 2 cats, a hamster, a wife, and a kid. So
In that
Sorry, a lot
order.
of them. So we like to, my daughter's doing a recital tonight. She's a singer, so I would be there if I wasn't here. No offense. But so we like to do family time. We like to go to Napa, and we love to travel. We've traveled around the world as a family, and we have one daughter's 11 years old, who's very mature for her age because she's traveled to several countries. About 13, I think it's been, that we've been traveling.
Thank you.
So my hobbies are fly fishing, working on my old 67 Mustang, and volunteering with your local Cupertino Rotary, especially for the youth leadership camp that I volunteer, that I'm the chairperson for, getting those kids into a summer camp every year to teach them leadership skills. Pets, so my wife's sitting in the audience. We've had 3 Labradors. The last one passed of old age, and she's been bugging me to get another Labrador puppy, but I'm the one who ends up cleaning up after the dog and doing all the housework. And so I've been resistive so far after 28 years of marriage.
Thank you. And thank you for sharing some personal notes. Now back to a tough question. How would you address racist comments and attitudes among employees and the departments? What kind of discipline is appropriate in a case of a racist comment? And for this one, let's see, who have we not started with? I think we've started with everyone. Yes. Who'd like to go first?
No.
I'll take a volunteer.
I will.
Thank you very much.
So that happened in our department, and it was highly reported in the news. There were a group of people who, on duty, private text messaging, the most horrific, horrible texting I've ever seen. I made a strong statement that I thought they all should be terminated. All but one was, and when Hirakawa was undersheriff, he supported the person not getting terminated. And these were just horrible, horrible racist comments. And I don't think there's any room for that in law enforcement. To even have those views, express those views when you're on duty to subordinate employees and co-workers is just wrong. We have a tremendous amount of power in law enforcement, and we need to be held to a higher standard.
Thank you. And we'll go to Mr. Salcido, please.
Yes, we have read in the news about recent discoveries. Even when Michael Tyree was killed, the text messaging that was going on, not only on the racist side, but on the beating side. I mean, literally, they were organizing beatings on the different decks. That is a major problem. But the question that has to be asked is, how did we get here? I mean, law enforcement is the most noble profession anybody can choose. We swear to protect our community on the federal constitution and on the state constitution. How did we get to a place where individuals feel free to communicate with each other racism and hate? I have to say that the leadership it's failed leadership. You have to constantly be reminding people, based on what's occurring throughout the country, to our staff to make sure they understand that is not tolerated. I have to ask the question, after the people were terminated, did we go through training? Did we make sure that everybody understands this does not happen in the Sheriff's Department?
Thank you. Mr. Monica.
I'm not sure what the deputies have in their, or correctional guys have in their policy manual, but San Jose PD, we have a code of ethics called police ethics that you follow. And if you don't, there's sanctions on that. That's what they need to come back, so they know what they're supposed to do. If someone violates that, I think it should be already written there, this was what will happen. You'll be terminated. Not like, well, maybe we're going to do, no, termination. If they know they're going to get in trouble, they're not going to do it. It's like a kid put his hand in the cookie jar, right? If they put it in, boom, you get it. And they know they'll get it if they put it in. So there has to be ramifications. Because as you speak to community people, as a matter of fact, I have on my website an inmate that I interviewed that was treated by the correctional people brutally. And he says no one listened to him. So with all the racist type comments coming out, it makes it even more volatile, and people are going to get hurt. And why do that? We're professionals. Thank you.
Thank you.
So one of my additional duties was equal opportunity officer. So I had to investigate racism, sexual harassment, and do a report after I did my investigation, gave it to the chain of command, my recommendation. So several times on my recommendation, I had leaders removed because of it. So one of the things we also had to do was do training every year, not just when something happens. When that happened, the racist comments, we got training in implicit bias once. My other job, we would do it every year because you have to change the culture and change the mindset. You can only do that if the training is constant. We also had cultural sensitivity training. So when we went into communities that we weren't familiar with, we knew how not to insult them, because certain communities are insulted by ways you don't even know unless you have that training. So I think we need to have, the diversity here, have some training on that too. And then put the policies. If I'm in charge, I'm going to have the policies in every office saying this is the equal opportunity office, this is who you contact if you feel you've been discriminated against, and I will not tolerate it with my signature.
Thank you.
So thank you for the question, because this is the first time it's come up in a forum. And so let me make it clear. Texting racist text on duty, people should be terminated. The problem with this particular case is that the Sheriff, Lori Smith, has, her administration leaked out confidential information, personnel information, in violation of court orders and personnel law to her benefit. The other problem is she points to me. Her command staff hasn't informed her. All they got to do is look at the paperwork. I was retired. I had already retired when these recommendations came to her about the discipline. All you have to do is look at the records, and her personnel assistant sheriff's in the audience. All you got to do is look at who was the Skelly officer. John Hirakawa was retired, made no such recommendations. And so this has been leaked out to the benefit of one candidate and to the detriment of another candidate, and the Mercury News retracted that article based back in February.
Thank you. Our last question for all of you now is the following. What question do you wish had been asked of you tonight? So for this one, let's start with Mr. Monica in the middle, and, and we'll go to your left. Thank you.
In the Mercury News, there's a lot of fake news in there. They're not portraying who we really are. They give Lori and John saying, these are the greatest people. The other people, who cares about them? I'd like someone to ask for once to say, in comparing us to them, why should we be the better candidate? I'm by far better than these two. I've done more through San Jose PD, the innovative department, the top department in the country, United States, not just in their minds, okay? So I would rather have people say, how about you guys? They're saying that you're just on the side. And why aren't you on the top? It's because the media wants one of these two, not any of us. Even though we're the better, we'll do a better job, we'll make changes in our different ways, but it'll happen. I wish that people would ask questions like that instead of reading the paper and go, oh, the paper's right. Like the statistics today, if you read that, how? It's a.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Salcido?
Well, I mean, to me, I honestly think when we look at as I said, I've lived here my entire life, and I've seen changes that I'm not happy with, to tell you the truth. The homelessness population growing. And did you know that in jail, if there's a homeless individual there, we consider them housed? So they're not even counted when we count our homeless. To me, that doesn't make any sense. We've got individuals living in our jails that are going to be homeless when they're released, which means we're pumping out homeless people every month. And then we wonder why the encampments keep growing and moving and not changing. We need to bring in programs into the jails where these homeless individuals start getting treatment, and we assess them and we look and see if we can get housing for them out of jail. Why are we releasing them to an overpass? I mean, it's going to continue. And I also remember when we used to drive up to San Francisco and it was a beautiful city. Well, guess what's coming to town? BART. BART's going to connect all of us together, this whole Bay Area, Oakland, San Francisco, and San Jose. What do you think is going to happen once that happens? And we're in charge of ETA. We should be on top of it.
Thank you.
So I wish that you had asked about mental health, because I think it's a really big problem for all communities, not only just in the jails and in the homeless encampments, but I think there needs to be a statewide solution to mental health living on the streets. I told the governor one time that it was his father's fault for closing all the mental hospitals, and he laughed and he said, yeah, my father started it and Reagan finished it. There needs to be a statewide solution, because the people who have mental health issues do not belong in jail. It's sometimes very difficult for families to deal with. There needs to be a solution where they can get the proper treatment and care.
Thank you. Mr. Hirakawa.
So I believe the question I think should have been asked is, what are the emerging issues both on the custody side and on the enforcement side of the Sheriff's Office? So on the custody side, the emerging issues is how we're dealing with the mentally ill and the other medical issues in the jail, because the fact of the matter is, it's a constitutional requirement that we provide that, because they can't check out of the jail and go seek their dental, orthodontist, optometrist, or mental health provider. That's why it's a constitutional requirement that we provide adequate care under the constitutional law of the Eighth Amendment. So that needs to be addressed. The other issue is emerging issues on the enforcement side, how we collaborate with other agencies in this county and in the region to keep you safe, to keep us all safe. And so, again, how do we go about doing that and collaborating? I've been known to be a collaborator and to work with other agencies. The other issue is use of force. So how do we end up shooting and killing a Navy veteran in the intelligence unit when on a welfare check in his home in Saratoga and kicking two doors? How does he end up shot dead?
Thank you very much.
I'd like to know why nobody asked, why is there no term limits for the sheriff? Because local politicians all have term limits, but the sheriff, the assessor, Larry Stone, and the DA are actually in the Constitution of California. So you have to vote them out. Otherwise, you have to change the California Constitution. So those are the three positions that you cannot get termed out of. So I believe in term limits. And I also believe as a leader, when you've been successful, you leave on a high note, and that's a good time to go. So I think 2 to 3 terms would be a maximum, because you need change, because otherwise you get complacent. Once you get complacent, you saw the escapes, the deaths in jails, and everything else. So you have to have some new leadership, new ideas, new changes. So if there's no term limits, then you, the voter, has to make that decision when you've had enough of your taxpayer money going to lawsuits. Because if you don't realize it or not, all these things that happen cost a lot of money in lawsuits. So when you're saying you're saving Cupertino money, you're actually not. You're costing the whole county money with Michael Tyree's death and these escapes and everything else.
Thank you. I'd like to thank all of the candidates this evening, and a big round of applause for them. I think it's wonderful that we have this kind of a choice in our republic form of democracy here in this country. And I want to thank all of you for putting yourselves forward to serve, and appreciate all of what you shared. It is not easy to be up here and answer these questions. Thank you for submitting questions. I apologize if we did not get to yours. I tried to combine some, and I hope we covered the key points for you this evening. If you want more information, please go to our Voters Edge, which the League of Women Voters puts up for your general information about the June election. Lots of good stuff. Excuse me? we are out of time. This last question was for them to conclude with what they wanted to say that we did not ask them and give them the opportunity. We thank you again for coming, and we're going to take a 5-minute break, and then please return. The stage is going to be reset for the proposition presentation and pros and cons for the June ballot. Thank you again for coming.
Everybody